When I heard Soul Reaver 1 and 2 were getting remastered, my initial reaction was disappointment. While remasters often give a facelift to beloved classics, their primary focus is on improving the original game's graphics and sound quality. This means better resolution, enhanced textures, and sometimes updated lighting effects. However, the core game elements remain unchanged, and although it might look, sound, and play better, it still bears a strong similarity to the original games we played years ago. It's like watching an old movie in high definition. Clearer, yes, but still fundamentally the same. On the other hand, remakes rebuild the visual aspects of the game from scratch. They take advantage of modern technology to completely overhaul character designs, environmental details, and overall visual storytelling. Imagine seeing your favourite game with cutting-edge graphics, realistic textures, and immersive lighting effects that breathe new life into the world you once explored. Remakes offer a fresh, visually stunning experience that delivers a modern, captivating look, but sometimes, in smoothing out the rough edges, the spirit of the original gets lost. And herein lies the tricky part. Where do we draw the line between preserving the charm of the original and modernising it enough to meet today's standards? How much change is too much, and how much is not enough? Finding that perfect balance that appeals to most fans is an art form in itself, and it's a challenge that developers face when deciding between a remaster and a remake. With Legacy of Kain, this balancing act becomes even more crucial given the passionate fanbase and the series' iconic status. Although it may not be the full-blown remake I was hoping for, the Soul Reaver Remaster offers a nostalgic yet refreshing journey through one of gaming's most iconic revenge stories. Upon being cast into the abyss and awakening as a wraith once again, I was pleasantly surprised by how good it felt to control Raziel. The developers at Aspyr have made significant improvements, making movement and combat feel more intuitive. The updated control scheme is a welcome change. Trust me, as a content creator for the series, it was torture having to endure the clunky controls of the shoddy PC versions that were released on Steam. Navigating through the game felt like a constant battle, with the camera controls and character movements often becoming a frustrating obstacle. Now, thanks to the remaster's modern controls, the experience is much smoother. Using the right analog stick to freely move the camera feels natural and responsive, making it easier to explore Nosgoth's gothic environments. Gone are the days of awkwardly rotating the camera with the L2 and R2 buttons. This change is particularly noticeable in the platforming sections, where precise control and a clear view are essential. Journeying through Nosgoth feels fluid and responsive, allowing for a more immersive experience in this dark world. The remaster's refined controls help to eliminate some of the clunkiness of the original, providing a more polished and enjoyable gameplay experience. All in all, these enhancements make revisiting Soul Reaver a far more pleasant and satisfying journey, and I'd say it's by far the best way to play these classic titles right now. For the most part, combat remains unchanged. It follows a puzzle-like formula where players are required to use the environment. In the original Soul Reaver, one of my favourite elements was the innovative ways needed to conquer your undead adversaries. Instead of simply hacking away at your vampire foes, the game encouraged you to utilise the environment by throwing them into spikes, water, fire, exposing them to sunlight, or impaling them with a spear. This added a strategic layer to the combat, making it feel like a puzzle where you had to carefully consider your surroundings and use them to your advantage. It was incredibly satisfying to survey the battlefield, identify the available hazards, and dispatch enemies in a way that was both challenging and rewarding. This unique approach to combat distinguished Soul Reaver from other games of its time, and added depth to the overall gameplay experience. Unfortunately, the remaster loses some of its charm as it transitions from Soul Reaver 1 to Soul Reaver 2. In the sequel, Raziel's encounters with human enemies lead to more straightforward combat, as humans are inherently easier to kill than undead creatures of the night. This shift diminishes the need for using one's environment strategically, which generally makes the combat feel repetitive and less engaging. Although this is more of a critique of the original Soul Reaver 2, the remaster doesn't really do anything to address the underlying problem with the game's combat. While the updated controls do enhance the overall experience, the simplicity of the battles in Soul Reaver 2 compared to its predecessor leaves a lot to be desired. Personally, I feel like a remake could have addressed most of these issues by incorporating more complex enemy behaviours and abilities whilst retaining that puzzle-like quality of combat from the first Soul Reaver. Perhaps the human vampire hunters and Seraphan could have been equipped with magical armour that resisted Raziel's abilities, compelling him to adapt his strategy and use the environment in unique ways to defeat them. This would have added a layer of complexity and challenge, making every encounter a tactical puzzle to solve. Imagine Raziel facing off against a group of Seraphan warrior priests, their enchanted armour nullifying his direct attacks. Instead of relying on brute force, players would need to be cunning, using the surroundings to outsmart their foes. For instance, they could lead enemies into traps, leverage environmental hazards like collapsing structures, or use fire and water to their advantage. This approach would maintain the strategic depth of the first Soul Reaver game. Soul Reaver 2's gameplay issues extend beyond just combat. Unlike the original's open-ended design, the sequel suffers from excessive linearity. For example, the frequent backtracking through different timelines becomes monotonous and detracts from the experience. While this linear approach does contribute to a more consistent narrative pace, especially as the stakes are heightened and the lore becomes richer, it feels like a step backward from the innovative open world of the first Soul Reaver title. Many fans, myself included, find this linearity to be a regression from the exploratory freedom that made the first Soul Reaver game so captivating. Of course, when it comes to remasters, the visuals are often the centre of attention. The remastered version of Soul Reaver 1 certainly stands out graphically and is a vast improvement from its PS1 days. Despite early criticisms from some fans who claim they couldn't see any visual enhancement in the backgrounds, upon closer examination, we can clearly see the blurry backgrounds have been replaced with sharper textures and better lighting that breathe new life into this mesmerising world. The ability to toggle between the old and new graphic styles is a fantastic feature that easily showcases these quality of life changes. It's an option more games should adopt. Legacy of Kain is a series steeped in Western and Middle Eastern religious motifs, reflected in its level design through stained glass artwork, murals, stone carvings, medieval cathedrals, and temples. The updated visuals make exploring these areas a joy, with the Gothic architecture and eerie landscapes more striking than ever. The lighting and sounds in the spectral realm particularly enhance the otherworldly atmosphere of Raziel's journey. It's worth noting though that the in-game geometry remains polygonal, a reminder that despite the visual upgrade for modern systems, there are limits to what a remaster can achieve. Aside from the improved visuals, one standout feature is the inclusion of a dynamic day and night cycle, which adds a layer of depth and immersion that the original release lacked. As night falls, the atmosphere becomes eerie and foreboding, enhancing the game's tension and mood. However, some areas like the grounds of the Silence Cathedral can become excessively dark and difficult to navigate. The character models are also a bit of a mixed bag. Now, before you shoot the messenger, let me clarify. I don't dislike all the redesigned models. In fact, I think many of them are quite good. Raziel, for instance, has been revamped with greater fidelity. This polished look works to keep his appearance consistent across both games. while also resembling his look in Legacy of Kain Defies. However, I do wish that the Wraith Blade had retained the ghostly crossguard and hilt from Defies. It would have made the spectral sword look more in tune with its ethereal origins. I also really love what they did with Raziel's brothers. The remaster has given the brothers menacing new features, which truly elevates their presence in the game. Each brother's design has been meticulously updated to reflect their unique, monstrous traits, making them more intimidating and visually striking. The enhanced textures and lighting bring out the details in their grotesque features, from Malchia's decaying flesh to Zephon's creepy, towering figure. This attention to detail not only enhances the horror elements of the game, but also makes the encounters with them more memorable and impactful. Now let's talk about Kain. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of his reimagined design. For me, it's all about the eyes. They just don't sit right with me. In many scenes, Kain looks bug-eyed, which is jarring and detracts from his dignified and regal presence. His eyes appear too exaggerated, almost comical, and they lack the depth that defines his character. They look like they're coming out of his sockets, and don't always appear symmetrical. An updated design could have maintained the essence of Kain's formidable persona while modernising his appearance, but in my view, this current rendition falls short. To be fair, Elder Kain is a character that's hard to get right artistically. I think his best visual representation is in the opening cutscenes of both games. While it's clear an effort was made to try to capture his look from these CGI intros, they didn't quite nail the landing. Likewise, Mobius, another key character, was a letdown for me. His original visage in Soul Reaver 2, with its expressive nuances, were captivating. However, the remaster leaves me longing for that familiar detail. His skin is almost too pristine, with less pronounced forehead lines and an odd, inconsistent darker skin tone that disrupts the authenticity of his facial articulation. One of the most jarring changes again lies in the eyes. The original Mobius from Soul Reaver 2 had a piercing gaze, his irises brimming with complexity, as if he could gaze into the depths of the protagonist's soul. Just look at his irises in this scene. It's as if you can see the wheels turning behind them as he tries to manipulate Raziel. But in the remaster, they are so opaque that they almost disappear, stripping away a vital layer of his character. This just comes across as an unnecessary alteration to me, obscuring the meticulous effort the original developers poured into crafting him. Such changes detract from the character's ability to convey emotion, which at times makes it hard to appreciate the intrigue which is meant to be conveyed through his eyes. Generally speaking, the graphical improvements are less striking for the Soul Reaver 2 remaster, as it appears akin to a PlayStation 2 game rendered in HD, rather than a title designed for the latest hardware. For instance, when we switch between the old and new graphics for the Elder God, it looks like the creature has undergone a simple colour change. While there are visible upgrades, they don't elevate Soul Reaver 2 to the same level as its predecessor, which leaves me yearning for a higher degree of graphical fidelity and polish for one of my most beloved story-driven games. This is just my personal opinion, and I acknowledge that opinions can differ widely, especially on a subjective matter like character design. What's particularly interesting, however, is that several characters featured in the initial promotional teasers did undergo changes before the remaster's release. I remember fans expressing disappointment that the game wasn't dark enough, and there was significant controversy over Rahab's initial redesign. This led to several revisions, indicating the developers were attentive to fan feedback, which is always a good thing. This responsiveness is something I encourage, as it improves the remastering process, making it feel like a collaborative effort between the developers and the community. However, I do wish we could have seen more significant work to characters like Kain, Mobius, and human Raziel. Kain, with his powerful and intimidating presence, could have benefited from a more refined redesign that maintains his dignity, This shouldn't be too difficult to achieve, as evidenced by one fan's image, where they simply added some shading over his eyes, which makes him look far better. Mobius, the manipulative time streamer, deserved an update that reflects his cunning and deceptive expressions more vividly. Human Raziel, on the other hand, doesn't quite look as arrogant and spiteful as his original counterpart, which is a bit disappointing. His initial depiction had an intense aura of pride and smugness that introduced layers to his character, and a more accurate representation in the remaster would have been a welcome addition. Overall, while the remaster brings many positive graphical updates, there are still some areas where further improvements could have elevated the game, especially in terms of character design. The developer's willingness to listen to feedback is a promising sign, and hopefully future updates or patches can address some of my concerns, making the game even more enjoyable for both new and returning players. Perhaps the best thing that Aspyr has accomplished with these remasters is packing the game with a treasure trove of bonus content that I know fans are bound to enjoy. In celebration of the 25th anniversary of the original Soul Reaver, this extra content feels like a heartfelt homage to the community. Players can immerse themselves in galleries showcasing fan art, cosplay, concept art, game trailers, outtakes and demos. There's also the opportunity to read through the scripts of both games, delve into Nosgoth's lore, and view detailed character renders. Plus, there's a music player featuring the game's excellent soundtracks. I also had a blast with the photo mode, which allowed me to get a closer look at the characters and environments while capturing some amusing moments. One of the most exciting features though is the ability to play through Soul Reaver 1's cut content. These lost levels serve as interactive museums, allowing fans to explore and appreciate what might have been. Although they lack enemies, these levels are more accessible for fans to explore without needing to download the alpha and beta prototypes on PC. For me, revisiting these areas was a trip down memory lane, especially since I could now enjoy the deleted content without my immersion being shattered by a glaring hole in Raziel's chest, as I experienced while working on my Soul Reaver Prime video. As I wrap up my thoughts on the Soul Reaver remasters, my only real gripe lies in some of the design choices for the character models. However, this is a minor quibble in light of the sheer dedication and hard work the developers have put in. Their commitment has resulted in a beautifully crafted restoration of two beloved classics, truly honouring the spirit of the original games. Looking ahead, the future of the series is full of promise. We have a brand new graphic novel on its way to us soon, and there's been talk of potentially remaking Blood Omen, and even developing new entries in the series, as highlighted in the recent Noclip documentary. The allure of Nosgoth remains strong, and the prospect of revisiting this rich, immersive world is incredibly exciting. The Legacy of Kain games are nothing short of narrative masterpieces, with a Shakespearean depth and complexity. This epic tale is brought to life through some of the finest voice acting the industry has ever seen, and they should always be remembered and respected for that. The maturity and sophistication of these games, coupled with their high concept ideas, remain compelling and original even today. Indeed, the storytelling and world-building of Legacy of Kain stand the test of time, underscoring the lasting impact of this iconic series. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I'm currently working on a fun, light-hearted video about my quest to earn all the in-game trophies, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Until then, take care.